So the first principle or the first factor is people. People. And so when I mean people, I'm saying who are those people that are needed at every stage of the business? I mean, when you say people, it's very easy for us to think about staff and team members, but not necessarily. Not necessarily. Even though that's extremely very important, but not necessarily. When I mean people, I'm saying who are the people, relationships that need to be, cultivated at every level of the business so that the business can scale. So if you're into manufacturing, for instance, who are your suppliers? Who are your vendors? Who are the customers that you want to serve? These things must be very clear to the entrepreneur. Otherwise, we'll run around. Entrepreneurs, we have a lot of energy. That's a good thing about us. We might run around chasing a bunch of rabbits and you're really not hitting the goal. Okay, so people, who are those people that are needed? For instance, who are the kind of investors you need? Right? For different businesses, you might need to be talking to different sets of investors, right? Some investments are good for certain businesses and not good for some, right? So who are the investors you need, for instance? Who are the advisors that are needed? So people generally would mean who are the, what are the relationships that the business needs to surround itself with so that it can grow. Remember that we started from growth and scaling, right? And I explained the difference between the two. I mean, the difference between scaling and difference between growth, right? But either way, there are relationships that need to be formed so that the business can be on that fast pace and actually, scale. If those relationships are not there, then the growth, you can grow big into trouble. I don't know if you guys are, you can really grow big into trouble. That happens a lot of times. In fact, oftentimes, growth, just like, I mean, popularly, I'm sure you guys would have heard this before, growth creates complexity and complexity kills growth, right? That is typically what happens. So everyone has to identify what relationships are needed. Let me give you an example. The kind of staff strength that we needed when we were starting off is totally different from the kind of staff strength that we need now. In fact, at some point when we're starting, I was doing 3-4 jobs. I was the accountant, I was this, and I'm sure a lot of us can relate with that, right? You're doing a lot of things, right? Or maybe you have 1 or 2 staff and they're doing a lot. That is because at that time, the business cannot afford to hire, professionals to join. But as the business grows, it has to be able to bring in some people that will be able to, help build that foundation for it to grow. So at some point, I stopped being the accountant, right? We had to hire an account officer. Then at some point, we had to hire a CFO, right? Who has a lot of experience in the field, right? Not in the field, but, within other sectors and bringing experience to. We had to hire a head of HR. And now we're going to nearly 200 staff. But when we started off, we're barely maybe 6 staff. Now we've moved to 200. But then that's because with scale, you now need certain people. And before you start, you want to be able to identify the kind of people you need, because at every stage of the business, you will need certain people. I just give an example of staff because I know that for a lot of us, that's the first one that comes to mind. Let me give another example. Advisors. Before we started to scale, we had to settle down and look and check who are the advisors that we need, right? Who are the advisors that you need? You need maybe financial advisors, because you see, if you want to get into all of this by yourself, you may be playing with a lot of fire, right? Who are the advisors that you need? And certainly, the advisors you need when you are at a certain size may be different from the kind of advisors you need when you are quite very big. But certainly, you might need some advisors, legal advisors, financial advisors, right? And not getting the right advisors can land you into trouble. So there was a deal that we did a while ago, which has now taught me a lot of lessons. We didn't go into that deal with the right, we didn't even go with advisors at all. And the other party came very armed with advisors. We lost a lot of money in that deal because we didn't have the right advice. So for you, as you're starting off, you have to be able to identify who are the advisors that are needed, right? Legal advisors, it could be financial advisors, and so on and so forth. So that's under people. If you're into a business that you need suppliers, for instance, who are the kind of suppliers you need? You need a supplier that is able to help your business at that infant stage. So I remember when I was doing some studying at some point when I was in mobile electronics before starting iFitness. I remember very clearly that when we started off, the kind of suppliers that we're dealing with were the small ones, because those ones had our time. They could respond to us. The bigger suppliers were too big. Our orders were too small. Imagine somebody who is manufacturing in the millions, and then you now say, manufacture 10 pieces for me. The person won't take you serious. So even knowing the kind of suppliers you need, right, is also part of the relationships that you want to think about. So I would say, I've given some examples on that people. And if I'm to summarize, I would say that that number one factor you need to look at very well, who are the people that are needed at different stages of the business, because you need those people to be able to grow. Running that show alone is a recipe for failure. Recipe for failure. And it doesn't stop at any point, right? So even when in 2 years' time, you still need to assess who are the people now. At that point, you might be changing some suppliers, you might be changing some advisors, you might be the business may have outgrown some staff, which is true, right? And so on and so forth. So that's people. The second is strategy, which is, what is that idea that you're bringing to the market that is potentially industry dominating, or that at least gives competition a run. And we started from the standpoint of saying you want to grow and you want to scale, right? Ideally, if you are not thinking about that, then you don't need to follow all these things I was talking about, because there's no need, right? I'm suspecting that the people that are on this call are people who really want to do good stuff, right? You must have a clear-cut strategy, especially if you're in a market that is already mature, meaning that there's people in the market already, they've been there before you, they probably understand the market much more better than you, right? What are you going to do that will be industry dominating? A lot of times, I would suggest that your strategy be so clear-cut that it can be just one sentence. Clear-cut. This is what we are going to do to dominate the industry, or this is what we're going to do to be different, that enables this business to really scale. For some people, your strategy may be to be the low-cost supermarket chain. It could be to have, so I remember that, Domino's that we all eat today, the founder at that time said their clear-cut strategy at that time was pizza in 30 minutes. Pizza in 30 minutes. At that time, if you wanted to eat pizza, you wait, right? So it was a big deal, right? And so they weren't the first to come into the market to do pizza. They weren't. But at that time, that was their clear-cut strategy to win the market. To say, look, we know other people have been doing it. They may be fantastic, but we are going to come into this market and you get your pizza in 30 minutes. That was it. So having a clear-cut strategy that is industry dominating is key. Now, whether you are in a market that is emerging, meaning that it's just coming up, or you're in a market that is already mature, you have to go and think. And that's why, again, you might need advisors to think with you, but you see the rigor and the pressure is on you, who is the entrepreneur. So you see, while creating your strategy, it's also good to check, are you doing a transaction or you're doing a business? Let me allow you to digest that for a second. Are you doing a transaction or are you doing a business? A transaction is, I just want to make quick money. I want to sell this thing, collect my commission, and that's it. You're not seeing beyond now. For you to want to scale, you must really see beyond now. Otherwise, you will not be able to come up, any strategy you come up with will be empty, right? And so someone asked me two weeks ago, and the guy says, oh, that, he's been following iFitness, what we've been doing and stuff. And, and he asked me this same question, because when I hear this question, it is like a blow. I get dumbstruck. Like, how did you do it? There's no more clear-cut sentence. It's a body of things. And I said, look, that 3 words come to mind. The first is value. The second is raising the bar, meaning that you just want to keep improving or improvement. And the third is delayed gratification, meaning that you are ready to wait, right? You know what delayed gratification is, guys? You are not you're ready to weather the storm and wait and ensure that you have given value so that you can earn a profit. So we all have to check. If you are so much transaction driven, meaning that you just want to make money now, and you're not thinking business in terms of you want to offer value, and when that value is so crystal clear, it is, and that value must not be to you because you are not it must be to the people that you're serving, right? So if value is to me, but value is not to the thousands of people that we're serving, I'm sure you agree with me that I failed, right? So to you, right, who is the brain behind the business or the entrepreneur at the forefront, are you doing a transaction, you're doing a business? Please, if you're doing a transaction, it's best that you have a rethink, right? And you address that mindset so that you don't do all the hard work, you burn out, and it looks as though, you are not there yet. That can be quite very frustrating. For us to be able to create a clear-cut strategy, you must think business. And what's business? You are providing a solution that is valuable enough for people to bring money out of pockets and pay you over time, consistently. A transaction is, I just want to do quick business, I want to make a spread, and I want to move on. Usually, if you're so short-sighted, then you're probably running a transaction. For businesses, you've got to be extremely very long-sighted. So I was telling our team members that before we had our first member, before we had the very first, because we had a very humble beginning, right? Very humble beginning. We had our first branch was so small that if anybody gave us that branch now for free, we will not take it for free. Don't pay any rent. We won't take it. It was so small. It was 150 square meters. Now, our branches are 10 times, 15 times that size. And so when we started off, we did not know the market. Our problem at that time was this market is new. We didn't know if people would embrace fitness. Nobody had done it before. And so we came up and we said, guys, this is our strategy. And in fact, our vision in iFitness is to be Africa's preferred. So imagine if you are saying you're Africa's preferred and you have not even conquered Lekki. You're Africa's preferred, right? And I'm sure the guys in the room, about 3 staff at the time, just looked at me and like, this is motivational speakers, they have come again, right? And sometimes I doubted it. I had cold feet, honestly, because there was nothing that showed us that it was possible. Now, if anybody's coming after iFitness, they can see what we've done and maybe they have a bit of encouragement to do, but we didn't have that. So again, thinking business is different from thinking transaction. Otherwise, this call will just be a waste of time. So the first is people. The second is strategy, having a clear-cut strategy that is industry dominating, and the rigor is on you, the entrepreneur. The third will be execution. Execution. Guys, execution is where the problem is largely all the time. In fact, if you cross people, you cross strategy. Execution is where a lot of us fall short. And what I mean by execution is just getting things done. It is a problem, guys. And it's a problem that every business faces at every stage. So execution means that we have thought through what we need to do. We have charted the course that we want to, or the path that we want to take, and we get the boots on the ground. When you're executing, you don't have all the answers. If you wait to have all the answers, you'll be too late. So, and I'm not saying that we should be reckless, don't get me wrong, or we should not do due diligence, we should not, find out before moving. But again, you don't have to have all the answers. For every business that is potentially doing well, or they have gone through some hurdles, if you check very well, they had their pains, right? So let me give you an example. I was just telling my team members that there's certain locations that we opened this time last year. If those locations were given to us now, I was talking about, my initial example was when we started. If those locations, this is 2020, if those locations were given to us now in 2021, we will not take them, because now we're learning, we're adapting, we're understanding the market more, and we're doing things differently. So execution is really about just getting things done, making sure that you put our hands on the plow. It is not going to be easy. At some point, it will be discouraging. At some point, it is annoying, right? But you see, that's what a lot of times the men from the boys. Having a good product, having a fantastic strategy or a fantastic idea is never enough. In fact, if somebody has half as good the strategy that you have, and they have a higher percentage in terms of execution, they will beat you out of the market. Guaranteed. Execution is taking that next step now. So for you, it might be checking with your advisors. You know the advisors you need, right? Or you know the relationships that you need to cultivate. You know the next step to take, and just going after it and doing it now. Not because everything is all green, right, for you to move. But you're saying, you know what? It is not all green, but as we move, we'll keep, uncovering, and we'll keep, challenging ourselves. And this is even a culture that you want to bring in-house, because you can't run all the show alone. So even amongst your team members, is there a culture of execution that has to be, checked from time to time? I don't want to stay too long on execution, but I'm expecting that, we sort of get the idea, because it's very good. I'm sure all of us in this room, we have one fantastic idea or the other. Ideas, if you check, are not very, very scarce. Do you know that the guy walking on the street out there has an idea? Check. The problem a lot of times is putting the boots on ground. So I remember when we started to look for funding, a lot of people did not take us seriously, obviously, because there was no track record, there was no proof of concept. But the power of execution to say, we'll keep going, we are, whatever little we can do, we'll do now, and, with track record as we move, we'll begin to, show better proof of concept. That in itself was execution. If we waited until everything was green, we will probably, maybe I won't be on this call right now, because I don't see any reason why Chiagoze will call me, because I won't have anything to offer, right? So execution is extremely very important. For many of us, we have crossed stage 1, people, we have crossed stage 2. Some of us have a fantastic market-wrenching, industry-dominating idea right now. The third is execute, right? And then the fourth, obviously, is cash. Guys, as an entrepreneur, you always must find avenues for funding. It is an unending task that we have as entrepreneurs. We will never get to a point where we say, you know what? Cash is never the problem anymore. Cash is always the problem. You know why? Because while you're doing what you're doing, the market does not stop. Competition is probably getting stiffer. Demands of your customers is probably changing. So there's all those external pressures. So what I mean by cash is, how do you ensure that the business is fortified to weather the storm? Because as you move, there will be storms. And so cash, which is one of the things that I probably would suspect that many of us did not think was going to be there, is important, because remember, you want to grow, and you want to grow exponentially, which is scale. You cannot scale without having a good system of funding. It's not possible. Let me give you an example. In 6 months, we have opened 5 locations, right? Because, so it's like almost opening a location every 35 days. And this is gruesome, because to open a location for us, ideally, it takes about 4 months. So opening those within 6 months means that, there's a lot of, all those locations were being worked on almost back to back. And because COVID affected us. Now, if let's assume that you want to scale, but you want to use your internal generated revenue or funds to do the scaling, you'll be stretched. Why? Except your business is generating a lot of cash. You want to wait for 1 to be profitable and generate a lot of cash before you move to number 2. Then number 2 to be very, very profitable, then you move to number 3. You may not be able to dominate the market. Having the ability to scale means that there's something that is pushing that business. So for instance, if you want to franchise, for instance, right, you can have 10 franchisees sign up in a particular year. Ideally, if you wanted to do that with your internal cash, you may not be able to get to 10 locations all by yourself within 1 year. So cash is so very important. And there are various avenues to ensure that the business is properly funded. Now, there's internal cash, which the business is generating because the business has to be profitable, and there's external funding. Understanding the mix between those two is extremely very important. I'm trying to be careful not to turn this to a training program, because again, we don't have that time. But having the idea, if all I've done is just to ignite some small light bulb in your mind, it's enough. So that from this call, you can then go and work on it and then link up with the right people and make sure that these 4 things are running on all 4 cylinders almost about the same time. I remember very well, just before I stopped, that before we, so during the lockdown, which was about 6.5 months or so, we could not operate at all, right? So we had about, at time, I think we were already on number 9 and number 10, and all our locations were grounded. We did not open at all, meaning that we're not generating any revenues. If we did not have a good, steady funding, we will not be able to reopen back. And that's what's happened to a lot of businesses now. So there was a shock of the pandemic, right? And they cannot come back because they couldn't weather the storm. I'm happy that for us, we had secured ourselves in such a way that even with the pandemic, we're able to come back, right? And that's just an example of why cash is important. Whatever stage you're in now, I'm not saying you have a truckload of cash, don't get me wrong. But for every stage of the business, and that's why consultants are available, AFI and so on and so forth, they're available, financial advisors are available to advise and ensure that the business is well insulated so that when the storm comes, the business doesn't go with the storm. So 4 of those things are the topmost for me: people, strategy, execution, and cash. And I'm hoping that, we've been able to get 1 or 2 things that we need to work on